Hi, this is Zulfiqar and you're watching Social Sciences. In the previous video, we discussed about conformity and we get to know that conformity is the extent to which an individual complies with group norms or expectations. On the other hand, deviance is a behavior, trait, belief, or other characteristic that violates a norm and causes a negative reaction. The definition of deviance varies widely across cultures, time, and situations, so we can say that deviance is a relative phenomenon. It is important to remember that when sociologists use the term deviant, they are making a social judgment, never a moral one. If a particular behavior is considered deviant, it means that it violates the values and norms of a particular group, not that it is inherently wrong. No thought or action is inherently deviant. It becomes deviant only in relation to particular norms. Because norms vary from place to place, deviance also varies. Much of the literature on deviance focuses on crime and how different cultures define very different behaviors as criminal or not. These vast differences seen in how crimes are punished. Most serious crime in Pakistan today is punished by imprisonment, but many other societies lack this resource to build and maintain prisons. Therefore, they use other forms of punishment, such as it includes shunning, total banishment from the community. One category of deviance is crime, the violation of society's formally enacted criminal law. Even criminal deviance spans a wide range from minor traffic violations to prostitution, sexual assault, and murder. Most familiar examples of non-conformity are negative instances of rule breaking, such as stealing a candy from kitchen, assaulting a fellow student, or driving a car without license. We have different types of crimes here, such as white-collar crimes, corporate crime, organized crime, and hate crime. We are going to discuss all these crimes one by one. White-collar crimes are defined by Edwin Sutherland. According to him, it is a crime committed by people of high position in the course of their occupations. White-collar crimes do not involve violence and rarely attract police to the scene and with guns drawn. Rather, white-collar criminals use their powerful offices to illegally enrich themselves and others, often causing significant public harm in the process. For the reason sociologists sometimes call white-collar crimes offenses that occurs in government offices and corporate boardrooms, crime in the suites as opposed to crime in the streets. The most common white-collar crimes are bank embezzlement, business fraud, bribery, and antitrust violations. Sutherland explains that such white-collar offenses typically end up in a civil hearing rather than a criminal courtroom. Civil law regulates business dealings between private parties, and criminal laws defines the individual's moral responsibility to society. In practice, then someone who loses a civil case pays for damages or injury but is not labeled as a criminal. Corporate officials are also protected by the fact that most charges of white-collar crimes target the organization rather than individuals. When white-collar criminals are charged and convicted, they usually escape punishment. On the other hand, corporate crimes involves that sometimes whole companies, not just individuals, break the laws. Corporate crime is the illegal action of a corporation or people acting on its behalf. Corporate crime ranges from knowingly selling faulty or dangerous products to deliberately polluting the environment. And when we talk about organized crimes, we can say that organized crime is a business supplying illegal goods or services. Sometimes criminal organizations force people to do business with them, as when a gang extorts money from shopkeepers for protection. In most cases, however, organized crime involves the sale of illegal goods and services, often sex, drugs, and gambling, to willing buyers. Today, organized crime involves a wide range of activities from selling illegal drugs to prostitution to credit card fraud to selling false identification papers to illegal immigrants. And if we talk about hate crime, it is a criminal act against a person or a person's property by an offender motivated by racial or other biases. A hate crime may express hostilities towards someone's race, religion, ethnicity, or ancestry. It is not necessary that we always associate negativity with deviance. We also define especially righteous people, students who speak up too much in the class, or people who are overly enthusiastic about new computer technology as deviants. Even if we give them a measure of respect, what deviant actions or attitudes, whether negative or positive, have in common is some element of differences that causes us to think of another person as an outsider. So we can say that deviant is a person who does not fit in the sphere of normality. They always walk an extra mile either on positive or negative direction. Now we are going to understand the concept of deviance under the light of different theoretical paradigms. When we apply structural functionalist theories to the topic of deviance, the key insight of structural functional approach is that the deviance is a necessary part of social organization. This point was made by 𝐞𝐝𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐠 a century ago. 𝐞𝐝𝐢𝐬𝐧𝐠 made the surprising claim that there is nothing abnormal about deviance. In fact, it performs 4 essential functions. Deviance affirms cultural values and norms. As moral creatures, people must prefer some attitudes and behaviors to others, but any definition of virtue rests on an opposing idea of vice. There can be no good without evil and no justice without crime. Deviance is needed to define and support morality. Number 2 is responding to deviance clarifies moral boundaries. By defining some individuals as deviant, people draw a boundary between right and wrong. For example, a college marks the line between academic honesty and cheating by disciplining students who cheat on exams. Another point that 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐬𝐺𝐠 highlighted is that responding to deviance brings people together. People typically react to serious deviance with shared outrage. In doing so, Durkheim explained that they reaffirm the moral ties that binds them. For example, Zainab Alert Bill was formulated in which offenders will be sentenced to at least 10 years behind bars, up to a maximum of life imprisonment. This bill is a unanimous decision of the people, and it shows how the deviant behavior of the rapist bring together all the other individuals of the society. Another point raised by 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐬𝐺𝐠 is that deviance encourages social change. Deviant people push a society's moral boundaries, suggesting alternatives to the status quo and encouraging change. Today's deviance, in Durkheim's words, can become tomorrow's morality. For example, hip-hop music is moving from marginality to mainstream respectability. Deviant behaviors are actions that do not comply with social institutions. The institution's ability to change norms, wealth, or status comes into conflict with the individual. The legal rights of poor folks might be ignored while the middle class side with the elites rather than the poor. Conflict theory is based upon the view that the fundamental cause of crime are the social and economic forces operating within society. Social conflict theory explains that all norms, especially the law of any society, generally reflect the interests of the rich and powerful. People who threaten the wealthy are likely to be labeled as deviant, either for taking a people's property or for advocating a more egalitarian society. Jean-Jacques Rousseau also illustrated this point in his writings that civil society formulated laws to protect the rights of the rich class. And further, Karl Marx also argued that the law and all other social institutions support the interests of the rich. Or as Richard Skinny puts it, capitalist justice is by the capitalist class, for the capitalist class and against the working class. Second, even if their behavior is called into question, the powerful have the resources to resist deviant labels. The majority of executives involved in any corporate scandals have yet to be arrested. Only a few have gone to jail. We can check all the situation in our country as well. Take the example of our politicians. They are sitting outside jails due to their strong influence, and no one can put them in jails. Lastly, the widespread belief that norms and laws are natural and good mask their political character. For this reason, although we may condemn the unequal application of the law, we give little thought to whether the laws themselves are really fair or not. Some deviance may be necessary for a society to function. But Robert Martin argued that society can be set up in a way that encourages too much deviance. Specifically, the extent and type of deviance people engage in is dependent on whether a society provides us means, such as schooling and job opportunities to achieve cultural goals, such as financial success. Conformity lies in pursuing cultural goals through approved means. Our usual success story is someone who gains wealth and prestige through talent, schooling, and hard work. But not everyone who wants conventional success has the opportunity to attain it. For example, people raised in poverty may have little hope of becoming a successful person if they play by the rules. According to Martin, the strain between our culture emphasizes on wealth and the lack of opportunity to get rich may encourage some people, especially the poor, to engage in stealing, drug dealing, or other forms of street crimes. Martin called this type of deviance as innovation, using unconventional means, street crime, rather than conventional means, that is, hard work at a straight job to achieve a culturally approved goal, that is, your wealth. The inability to reach a cultural goal may also promote another type of deviance that Martin calls ritualism. For example, many people may not care much about becoming rich but rigidly stick to the rules anyway in order to at least feel respectable. And the third response to the inability to succeed is retreatism, rejecting both cultural goals and conventional means so that a person in effect drops out. Some alcoholics, drug addicts, and street people can be described as retreatists. The deviance of retreatists lies in their unconventional lifestyle and also in what seems to be their willingness to live this way. The fourth response to failure is rebellion. Like retreatists, rebels such as radical survivalists reject both the cultural definition of success and the conventional means of achieving it. But they go one step further by forming a countercultural, supporting alternatives to the existing social order. Further, labeling theory claims that deviance is a consequence of external judgment or labels which both modify the individual self-concept and change the way others respond to the labeled person. Labeling theory is also related to the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy, which is a prediction that causes itself to come true. Labeling theory states the idea that deviance and conformity results not so much from what people do as from how others respond to those actions. The associated stigma to the deviant form the social identity of the individual. And Erving Goffman identifies or defines stigma as a term for any physical or social attribute that devalues a person's group identity or an individual identity and which may exclude those who are devalued from normal social interactions. We can take the example of transgenders, we can take the example of prostitutes, etc. Robert Martin's strain theory, for example, defines cultural goals in terms of financial success. Traditionally, at least, this goal has had made more to do with the lives of men because women have been taught to define success in terms of relationship, particularly marriage and motherhood. A more woman-focused theory might recognize the strain that results from the cultural ideal of equality clashing with the reality of gender-based inequality. According to labeling theory, gender influences how we define deviance because people commonly use different standards to judge the behavior of females and males. Further, because society puts men in position of power over women, men often escape direct responsibility for actions that victimize women. In the past, at least, men who sexually harassed or assaulted women were labeled only mildly deviant and sometimes escape punishment entirely. By contrast, women who are victimized may have to convince others, even members of a jury, that they were not to blame for their own sexual harassment or assault. Research confirms an important truth. Whether people define a situation as deviance, and if so, who the deviant is depends on the sex of both the audience and the actors. Finally, despite its focus on social inequality, much social conflict analysis does not address the issue of gender. If economic disadvantage is the primary cause of crime, as social conflict theory suggests, why do women commit far fewer crimes than the men? This is the question which needs to be answered. Share your answer in the comment section below. This is all about deviance and how we discuss different theoretical paradigms to understand the very concept of deviance. Thank you very much. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe to my channel.